primary principle that we really focus on is the concept of first-party ownership of first-party data. And one of the ways in which you can really architect this and make that come to life is through the more newer concept of server-side data distribution or server-side tag management. And to speak a little bit further about that concept and that technology, would like to introduce my colleague, Tyler Blatt, Manager of Emerging Solution Strategy at InfoTrust.
Awesome. Nice to see you guys. Before we get started, I got a little bit to cover just about me. So I talk really fast, so buckle up. I curse a lot. I have a 7-month-old baby, so not getting a lot of sleep. But InfoTrust tried to hide this. They tried to hide it in my title. I'm literally a mess, M-E-S-S. So just letting you guys know before we get started. All right, so we're going to answer 4 questions here today. I know server-side's like a fairly technical topic, but I want to leave answering these 4 questions because everyone will just say, first-party data, server-side, it's what you need to do, and that's not good enough for me. Stephen talked about learning technically what's going on in the field and educating yourself, and I believe in that a lot. So we're going to answer these 4 questions. Why are we here and how do we get here? What's going on in this space? How did this become this world? What can we do with data, especially following the panel we just had? As privacy comes in, some people feel like it's a constraint, but there's a lot of things we can do with data and how do we work with it in this world. We'll look at the infrastructure now, so if everything's going under change, what's not working with the infrastructure, what's actually wrong right now, and then ultimately, how do we build towards the future? So if there's a problem with the current stack, how do we fix it? How do we move forward? So it won't all be pessimistic, it's very happy at the end. Okay, so why are we here and how do we get here? And when I say that, I mean specifically client-side tag management, the deprecation of third-party cookies, what's going on with the disruption in the space. So a long, long time ago, when the internet was new, this will be a brief history lesson, I know most of you probably know this, but this is just to get everyone on the same page. The internet came out and we didn't know how to make money off of it. It was just information on pages and everyone's like, hey, what's going on? We know this thing's cool and we're sharing information. Thank you, Tim Berners-Lee, but what do we do with this thing? And we realized there's real estate on pages, and the way to monetize this was people would pay to do essentially billboards. It was we could rent space on websites, and that started being the foundational monetization structure of the internet. And at first it was really stupid. You guys remember, like, congratulations, you've won. And it was like clickbait, weird articles, things that you wouldn't want to click on. And then we got smarter. We were like, hey, what about the context of the website that we're on? So if I'm on a website that's showing fashion things, I might want to show shoes and purses or something going with the most latest trends based off the context of that website on. That was clever. We were like, okay, now we know what we're doing. We're making more money with these techniques. And then somebody said, well, I know when someone's clicking on shoes or handbags or they're shopping at a sporting goods store. And as they go across all those sites, what if I knew all the things they were doing? Then I could give them exactly what they wanted when they went around. And that's like literally what third-party cookies allow you to do. So if you're one of those people that knows they're going away and really don't know what's happening they just allow you to understand behavior on multiple different websites and then follow someone across the internet. And it turns out, made a lot of money doing that. Like, it was a very profitable and good thing to do. So the entire industry, I mean, if you look at MarTech, it just trended up and kept trending up. These are fairly old numbers, but it's just been this explosion following this idea of how to keep the internet free and how to monetize it. And what happened with that money? We built a lot of shit. This is the MarTech map of 2022. The thing I always like to call out on this is every one of these tags wants to be on your website. Like every one of them. When you think of like, in following the previous panel, this is a nightmare. Like, how are we going to track down all of these places, and they all want your money, and they want to be a tag on your website? The world got very, very big. So what was this architecture? What happened? What were we really doing? Like, everything around this client-side architecture is centered around a few points. We got to identify users everywhere. I need to know who you are, what you're interested, what I can track about you. Everything is about around this concept of identity. Opposite of data governance, every piece of data to every platform, I'm going to send the same data to Facebook, the same data to Google, the same data everywhere. You're distributing your data all over the place. If I'm a multi-brand company, I got to figure out how I know who the same person is and combining it across all of my brands, so it's stitching everything together. Not so bad, but web and mobile content personalization, I will give you an experience based off of the data that you've given me. Personalized targeted advertising, which is obviously less subtle, obviously what I was talking about. Everything's built around, I need to know who you are and what you're interested in, because that's the only way that I think I can advertise to you and be profitable. And then ultimately communicating through every marketing channel. You want to talk about like exhaustion. I'm going to email you. You're going to get, this is exactly what Stephen was talking about earlier, where it's just every way that I can possibly go with a Nike example and following you around from store to store, when the entire system right now is really built around that. Turns out people didn't like this. This was like a super invasive thing to do, and everybody doesn't want to be tracked around everywhere, so things need to change. Well, we got to go to a privacy-centric nature, and what I'm calling out here, and I don't like to read text on slides, it's more just to follow along, but this isn't a burden. It's an opportunity to engage with people better. That what they're telling you as a market is, we don't like this, but we do want to engage with your brand, so how do you figure out a data stack that's going to address these issues? Like this system that we've created, how do we fix that? So a weird kind of parallel step. What can you do with data? Why do we collect data? What is possible with what you can do with data? And a quick thing, and I just always like to call this out, privacy is not the death of behavioral targeted, it's the death of unwanted. People that consent with you, you can still reach out to them if they say, yes, please engage with me, engage with my brand this way. This old system is not dying, it's just there needs to be a parallel system. We need to adhere to people that care about this consent, that they want to say no. So this is only the death of people not wanting this to work this way. This isn't the death of this system working. So what can you do with data? You can analyze data, so I look at it and I try to learn things about it. We can use data to fuel testing, so I can improve systems. We can do things like A/B testing. This next one, people are sleeping on, thinking about third-party cookies going away and data is going dark. I can use patterns of data to predict what's going to happen in the future. So if I need some operating time in which my data just disappeared, what a really easy and even privacy-centric way for me to understand where the gaps in my data are. So we can use it to predict what's going to happen. Ultimately, we can use it for enrichment, so we can grab data and other data, marry it together and learn even more about our customers. And then lastly, everybody knows we use it to target people, to reach out to them for engagement. We use it for ad targeting. And what does that really look like recently? About like this. Everybody thinks this whole big funnel needs to feed this massive ad targeting machine. And honestly, most of the things that I think like enrichment, adding things, CLV scores to figure out how to target them on ads. What am I predicting? I'm predicting revenue to know when I should push certain marketing channels. And all of this has kind of fallen into this kind of mentality. This section is really just meant to open up your mind. There's a lot more you can do with data than just engage with people. So this was actually a report that was sent out to CMOs, or a survey sent out to CMOs. What are you doing to deal with third-party cookies going away? What are your plans? And I think it's an interesting thing when everyone's telling you, hey, this is what you need to do, but like, what is the market going? What are the leaders thinking? Contextual targeting, big. Everyone's just like, that's safe. We can just go back to contextual. We have this return to contextual. And while I'm here talking on this point, just so I don't forget to make it, one of the things about returning to contextual, when we were doing contextual advertising as the main thing, the main industry standard, well before this rich targeting, we were not nearly where we are with machine learning, or where we are with experience, or where we are with making websites, and the entire infrastructure has evolved quite a bit. So that return is not a return to the past. It is evolving and can become more profitable than it ever was. There's no reason you can't engage with privacy-centric marketing things that way. Another safe one that I absolutely agree with, first-party data. Own what you own. Don't get locked into platforms. If you decide, let's say you're an Adobe Analytics customer, you want to move to Google Analytics. Do you want to say, well, I guess my insights are gone. I can't get them out in raw. I don't know what happened, so I have these KPIs that I've built over years and now they're just gone? Or do you want to own your own behavioral model? Sure, the analytics platform plays a big key in what you're doing. It'll calculate sessions and attribution for you, but don't you want to have the raw data so that you can control your KPIs over the history of your company? So what are you doing to own data on your end? Plus, again, panel before me, what if you need to do something for privacy? What if you need to clean it? What if there's something that you shouldn't have in there? If it's your data, you control the ability to delete those users, to clean that data set. But if it's in a platform, you're like, I hope they let me delete it or we're in trouble. So publisher first-party identifiers. This is reaching out and saying like, hey company, you figure out the identity problem. Like you do your own identity, you figure out identity. You guys made this problem where we use you for identity, so you figure it out. Not sure if that's the best case, but it's something people are considering. Industry identifiers, I think even less likely so. I don't think you're gonna get the entire MarTech industry to agree on this is how we're going forward. A lot of them like to be competitive, so those are all hard things to place your bets on, and the lower ones are much less important. Okay, so how do we react to this sea change? So shortly we're going to get into client side and then land the plane with server side, but what's important? What's not working in this? Well, one, I was just talking about first-party data. We need to own all our data in raw format. Let us have the ability to control our own future from both a privacy and execution perspective. So we're looking at systems that would facilitate that. This is something I see people sleeping on all the time. We need to interpret data into usable groups. So if I understand that I have a subset of users that will be consented, known, I know who they are, and I have a subset that's unconsented, treat them as such. I use an example. Disney uses those magic bands to know how people are moving around the park, and then they can say, you move to this side because these rides will have smaller lines and these rides will have larger lines, and they can use those to tell people how to move around the park. You don't need to know who any of those people are to do that. That is just operational understanding from an anonymous perspective how we run. So if you think of like session data, what channels people are coming from. I mean, this doesn't even have to be click IDs and we don't have to think of them that way. You could have a purely all 100% of your customers' data coming in a truly agnostic, unknown system, and then another subset are these people that say, no, I want to talk to you, I want you to reach out to me, this is your consented data set. Define them and treat them as such and build policies around them. So it's just way better philosophy stepping into this world. It's going to happen, so don't try to patch the old one, lean into the new architecture. Very similar to leaning into new architecture. If you think of like a lot of this is coming from our data layers, introduce the concept of sensitive fields and things that maybe shouldn't be collected and the classification of this data from the data layer. Why do we want to deal with this all the way down in the platforms when it becomes a nightmare? Introduce this concept earlier and govern it from that perspective. I kind of touched on this already, but for consented users, start connecting to things like a CDP, figure out how you're going to action with them, start building the first-party world for that. Getting all of your data in one place is great, so you're going to want visualization, especially when you start to look at large data and aggregate, and you want to move into maybe contextual, or you want to get into these places where we're going to make decisions. What are the most of my users interested in? How do I figure out user personas in a privacy-centric way? You're going to need a marketing data warehouse to put that data together and figure it out. This is an interesting one. When you think of the idea that everyone starts collecting first-party data on their own, you could start, meeting other people that have collected first-party data and marrying that data together, so you can lean into second-party data for enrichment. And so we'll likely in the next few years see a lot of people standing up clean rooms and services and APIs around clean rooms where you can reach in and get advertising ideas based off of own data. So are you ready to engage with that? And I actually made this before the AI boom, but just leaning on ML and AI to predict future trends in your data. So what's going to happen? How can I know what's going to happen and react to it? If we know we have these trends in data, let's use those trends to give us a little breathing room as data goes away. And I spent a lot of time on this slide, but I think this is maybe the most important thing. Control, agility, and ownership is everything you want to gauge every technical thing in this space. Do I own the infrastructure in which is collecting the data? And if I own it, that means I have the concept that I can control how data is being processed, where it's being processed, the context in which it's being processed. And if I control it, then I have the agility to react to the market. And I'll use an example of that later on where those three tenets can get you out of a sticky place in this current environment. So I want to stay on time here, but really these next two slides are to cover like what is the point of the data that we're collecting, because people forget this. You're in your day-to-day role and you're like, how are we going to deal with this thing? But the reality is everything that we've done is we want to collect something so we can ask it questions, but people are coming up with new questions and not thinking about the fact that we're not collecting data around them. What percentage of users are consenting and not consenting? What could I do to potentially drive consent? If my problem is customers don't trust me, what data can I collect to increase brand trust? How do I start asking the type of questions that we are facing right now in this environment and collect data around it? That's why we started this journey to begin with. Essentially all these questions, and they're just different angles at this, are to look at when we have this problem, how do we ask the questions that will allow us to understand deeper how our customers think about consent, how they think about privacy, and evolve how we're communicating them, knowing that it's going to increase the efficacy in which we use that data and their view of us. So again, this is just simple process. Determine the questions that are most important, build a system that answers those questions, expand on those questions, expand the system. Very, very simple, but we want that system to be privacy-centric. So let's take a look at what's not working. What's not working today? Why do we need to redo all of this? How did we end up in this place? We know it grew in some direction because of advertising, but what's going on? And in case somebody doesn't know, just because it's a fairly technical topic, when we say client side and we say server side, if you think about the fact that you reach out, so let's say you go to google.com, and then in your browser, a website appears. Everything that happens on your computer is the client side, and then the code that ran at Google to send that to your computer is the server side. So we're talking about moving to that place. Well, having that code run on customers' computers is a problem. We talked about earlier session, a customer thought they had 5 tags and they had 38 tags. All tracking happens on client side, which makes it very difficult to understand where am I sending data? What's going on? There's piggybacking. I'm sending data all over the place, and it's very hard to follow the privacy. Most signals are sent to most platforms, so you end up sending your data everywhere, and if you need to undo it because of GDPR and CCPA, good luck knowing where you sent things and what's going on. It's not very explicit, and it's hard to track. Processing is very performance expensive. What that means is every time I load a tag, the most technical thing I'll say, you have a number of TCP IP connections. Basically, it's highways. You have a number of highways that can load a website. Each tag takes up one of those highways. So do the images, so does every piece of text, everything on that site. So if you load a bunch of tags, you're actually slowing down page performance. So we're knowing that we're having this marketing exchange, this marketing value or this business analysis value, but we are giving it a page hit. A beautiful world would be to keep that value, but save the ability to tax the page or keep ourselves from doing that. The data is really public. We can see exactly what, someone could go to the website and know what platforms you're working with, where you're sending data, even like from a competitor perspective. If you're thinking, I have a competitor's website, you can go there right today, look at their network tab and know exactly who they're partnered with and where they're sending data and what's going on. It is completely public what's going on, which is not good for consumer privacy, and it's also not good for your company's privacy. You're really limited in the ways to send data. If you have warehouse data and you want to know what's going on in warehouses, if you have in-store kiosks, if you have all these other places, it's really, really hard when you have this system built for client side to actually like tap into all these other sources of data. Even mobile, while analytics has caught up quite a bit to mobile, it's still not really as trivial as client side, and it's harder and harder within these systems to keep up with a standard tracking across different devices, the way that it's currently built. I covered this one a little bit with the 5 to 38 tags. It's difficult to know where data went. It's very hard to know where. We actually at InfoTrust, will do a quick plug, built a product around this called Tag Inspector, which is centered around the use case of, we will tell you what tags are firing on your website and what data was sent where, because there was a whole market use case to build around this just because it's such a large problem. And this is a big one. It's not set up for data ownership. I mean, most client-side platforms have no ability to send a BigQuery or a Snowflake or a Databricks. They're not saying, hey, go own this data on your own and do things. They're saying, hey, send it to all these platforms and then we'll give you what you want later. We'll maybe share it with you and do your own ownership. So that's what's going wrong with client-side. How do we build towards the future? I told you it would be a more positive ending. So, one, what are the requirements for what we want to do? It has to facilitate data ownership. We have to be in control of what's going on. It's just not an option anymore. We need to be in control of where we're routing, processing, and activating our data. As legislation comes down for different countries and where data moves and what we're allowed to process and what all these rules are changing, and that, again, panel before me, how do you keep up with regulations? We need the ability to react as these legislations are changing. So we need to have control of what's going on in the context of today. It needs to be built around the need for governance and privacy. This shouldn't be something that a platform that exists is addressing, but it's built with the concept of that from the beginning. It's got to address those shortcomings for client-side TMS. We have to be able to solve those problems that existed in the system before us. These are just nice ones. It needs to be reduced time to insights. Why are we now accepting that we need these long processing times for data? I'm sending it to my own system. If I want to build a real-time report, I should be able to do that efficiently. And then lastly, lower company effort to evolve the tracking plan. So if I say I want to now add this system or I want to add this, how do I make sure that that's governed? It's within a plan, but it's not a big headache to start including other systems or evolving my measurement. So server side, how does it do that? What is the cool thing about server side that elevates and addresses the problems of client side? One, it moves your tracking to a company-owned server. What does that mean? What you're doing with server-side, and server-side GTM is great at this, is you're essentially standing up a web app. This is, I'm going to make my own web application that I'm going to send data to, and because it's a web application, I can put my own domain in it. So you can think you can send data to data.yourwebsite.com, and now you're communicating in a first-party context, and you own the server and how you can react to it. So another one, data routing is completely simplified and explicit. So when we talked about JavaScript and client side, you have piggybacking, you don't know where you sent things, it's hard to track the data layer. In the cloud, in server side, it's all very explicit. I'm sending to these 5 tags, and I have logs of the data that went to them. And I can tell you who those users are and what it is, and if I ever need to reverse that or understand it more, I have the receipts. I no longer need tools or help to figure out the holes in that space. This one's really, really cool. You can enrich and process data before it goes somewhere. So if you think like, hey, I have a model that'll crunch CLVs, and as data changes, I need to reevaluate that CLV. Before I send the data to Google Analytics through Server-Side Tag Manager, I can actually reach out and hit a cloud function that runs a CLV score and pulls it back in and goes all the way through Google Analytics. So you think all of this post-processing that we have to do, and then how are we going to upload it back into the systems? It all can be done on its journey because, again, we're in control, which is much better. It's way more private. Like I said, everything's public on the client side, but now this is one stream of data that is encrypted going to a site that you own, and nobody knows where it goes after that or what's going on. That's also very important. Nobody knows, so you can get yourself into trouble sending data to the wrong place. It's very important to be explicit because now the public doesn't know where you sent this data, they just know you sent it to yourself. So you do have a strong responsibility because of that private nature to be very explicit on where you're sending data and make sure that your governance plans are up to date. It can support data streams from anywhere. So anywhere in the world, any device. If you have in-store kiosks, it's very, very easy with server-side to just start sending data from anywhere. It supports streaming straight into warehouses. So we talk first-party data. We need that. We're going to send data straight to BigQuery or wherever your warehouse is. That's very easy. And lastly, it lowers time to insights. So you can get your data right away. So if we're making a real-time data, I actually, for a customer, I helped build a real-time revenue prediction dashboard, which would say during their holiday period where they have to manipulate their marketing, they want to know what is our revenue tracking for today? What revenue will we have through the rest of the day? Should we send that email blast or no? Should we maybe hold this email blast because we're going to meet our goals, or no, we're looking bad today? But I had to do several hacks to the systems that we were pulling just to get that data in real time. With server side, I can collect real-time revenue data and then offer projections and help people that need those in dashboards with much less hassle, much less architecture. So this is a real example. This is all like in theory, server-side should be better, and these are concepts. This is a real example. Basically, there's a few countries, but I'll use France as an example. This happened. This is with Google Analytics. You're not allowed to use it in France. The reason is you can't have an identifier that is of a French person leave the country and then go to an American entity, and there's that French identifier is now being stored on American soil. And Google is solving this problem, but in the meantime, we had to shut Google Analytics off because well, how are we possibly going to facilitate such a request? However, if you owned the server, you could serve it in France. And if you had the control to change how you're sending data to Google Analytics because you're sending it, you could actually clean client ID and any other identifiers and still get the anonymous data going in so we don't have to turn the lights off. And oh yeah, I can also send it to BigQuery. So I could just say a French BigQuery and send all the data there. And now it's still compliant. And I have the agility to react to that. I never had holes in what's going on. So when you own the infrastructure and things start changing, you're able to react much, much faster. Final slide, let's land the plane. The technology is here. So this is, we're getting to the point where third-party cookies isn't so far out anymore, and this is going to hit. But this is not a problem. This is an opportunity to engage with customers better. This is an opportunity for a better architecture. Leaning into privacy-centric narratives actually has a subtext of leaning into governance will increase the efficacy of your data pipelines quite a bit. So this is a chance to relook at your architecture and figure out in a privacy concept, how can I use that to actually edge out my competitors and make more money with data? Thank you, guys.